Two separate federal investigations. One is digging into state dollars and another looking into state driver's licenses.
America, Tim Walz has gone from claiming he's friends with school shooters
I've become friends with school shooters
to desperately dodging questions about massive fraud scandals that happened under his watch as Minnesota governor. While federal investigators continue uncovering billions of dollars in stolen taxpayer money that funded Somalian terrorist networks, Walz is now dipping and dodging the fact that he's under the heat lamp for running one of the most poorly managed states in the country. But here's what's absolutely pathetic. Instead of taking responsibility for the systematic fraud that occurred under his administration, he's trying to blame everyone else while federal agencies expose his policies created the perfect environment for organized crime to flourish.
A nonprofit and its affiliates with these Somali migrants claim to have fed tens of thousands of American children during the pandemic. They were reimbursed for those meals by taxpayers. However, federal prosecutors found that almost all of those meals were never even delivered to hungry children.
What is up, guys? Tyson Dela Cruz here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. Since we've been following this Minnesota situation for a while, we compiled a complete playlist of everything that's happened up until this point. You'll find the link somewhere on the screen here or in the description down below to get caught up on the massive scandals. Let me start with the latest bombshell that has Walz scrambling like eggs for cover. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy just revealed that Tim Walz's Minnesota gave 33% of commercial driver's license unlawfully. Let me rewind that back. That is 33% of unlawful driver's license to people who should have never been driving big rigs on American roads.
Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota gave 33% of these licenses unlawfully.
Think about what this means. 1 out of every 3 commercial driver's license issued in Minnesota under Walz's administration was given to somebody who wasn't legally qualified to operate an 80,000-pound truck on American highways. These aren't just paperwork violations. These are massive safety risks that could have killed innocent families and have.
We got California, Gavin Newsom, to revoke 17,000 unlawfully issued licenses.
Secretary Duffy has been cleaning up the mess nationwide, getting California to revoke 17,000 unlawful issued licenses and closing down half of the fake schools that were giving out fraudulent CDLs. But Minnesota, under Timmy Tampon Walz, was one of the worst offenders, creating a systematic pipeline for unqualified drivers to get commercial licenses. Now let's look at how Timmy Tampon Walz is responding to this mounting evidence of systematic failure under his administration. Instead of taking responsibility, he's using the classic Democrat playbook. Blame Trump, blame Republicans, blame everybody else except for who was actually in charge.
I welcome the help. We do all we can. DPS is on this.
It's a probe called for by Minnesota Republicans, and the governor welcomes it with caution.
I don't think anybody in here really believes their motive and their timing is about actually doing something about this.
Listen to this pathetic response. I welcome the help. We do all we can. I don't think anybody in here really believes their motive and their timing is about actually doing something about this. He's simultaneously claiming he welcomes the investigation while suggesting it's politically motivated. This is classic tampon Tim Walz trying to have it both ways.
Follow the laws we always have. No different than any other state.
In a statement, Secretary Duffy said, quote, Minnesota failed to follow the law and illegally doled out trucking licenses to unsafe, unqualified non-citizens, endangering American families on the road.
We are following the law exactly as it's written, exactly as we implemented it for decades. And coincidentally, today they decide to keep piling these things on.
But evidence shows that Minnesota is dramatically different from other states. When 33% of your CDLs are unlawfully issued and billions in taxpayer money gets stolen through fake programs, you, my friend, are not following the law. you are enabling organized crime. What Walz doesn't want to acknowledge is that these aren't partisan political attacks. These are legitimate federal investigations by multiple agencies that have uncovered systematic fraud and potential terrorism funding under, guess who? Your administration.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is pointing blame to Governor Tim Walz as he directs federal authorities to investigate accusations that money fraudsters took from state programs may be funding overseas terrorism.
This isn't about politics. This is about national security and the systematic theft of tax money that occurred under Tampon Tim's watch.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy threatened to withhold millions in federal funds if the state didn't revoke commercial driver's licenses the department says are illegally obtained by non-citizens. An audit released Monday found that 1/3 of non-domiciled CDLs were issued illegally. And if the state didn't comply within 30 days, $30 million in federal highway funding were at risk.
When federal agencies are threatening to cut off funding, that's not a political prosecution. That's accountability for systematic violations of federal regulation. Tampon Tim's handling of this fraud scandal fits perfectly with his pattern of making bizarre statements, then trying to dodge responsibility. Remember, this is the same guy who claimed he was friends with school shooters during the vice presidential debate.
I've become friends with school shooters.
A comment that was meme-worthy for the ages. The school shooter friends comment was just a gaffe. It was just a little peek into the window of how Timmy Tampon Walz thinks and operates. Not very well. He says things without thinking about the consequences, just like he ran Minnesota without thinking about the consequences of his policies on fraud prevention and public safety.
Look into Minnesota and their fraud on visas and their programs. 50% of them are fraudulent, which means that wacko Governor Walz either is an idiot or he did it on purpose.
State Republicans are demanding to know exactly where these fraudulent dollars were going and what they were being used for. These are legitimate oversight questions that any competent governor should be able to answer. But Timmy Tampon Walz is treating them like partisan attacks. Let me be clear about the scope of the fraud that occurred under Tampon Tim's administration. We're not talking about just isolated incidents or minor accounting errors. We're talking about a systematic theft of taxpayer money through programs that Walz's administration either created or failed to properly oversee. The Feeding Our Future scandal alone involved over $250 million in stolen federal nutrition funds, with much of that money flowing back into Somalia, where terrorist organizations obviously take their cut. The autism fraud scheme saw federal funding explode from $3 million to nearly $400 million in just 5 years. Largely through fabricated diagnosis.
In February of this year, we asked for all the states for the first time to turn over their data to the federal government to let the USDA partner with them to root out this fraud, to make sure that those who really need food stamps are getting them, but also to ensure that the American taxpayer is protected. 21 states said yes, not surprised. 29 states said yes, not surprisingly, the red states, and that's where all of that data, that fraud comes from. But 21 states, including California, New York, and Minnesota, the blue states, continue to say no.
Walz is now under the heat lamp like meat at the Golden Corral, and his dipping and dodging strategy isn't working. The Treasury Department, the Transportation Department, and the Justice Department are all investigating different aspects of systematic failures that occurred under his administration.
It's not a coincidence that they're targeting Minnesota. We certainly welcome those investigations. They've been done by all of you, and they've been done here. We certainly want to know that, but it's also the Transportation Secretary who is threatening to withhold our federal dollars. Look, that's who they are. This is who they are.
The fact that Walz claims to welcome the investigation while simultaneously questioning the motives and timing shows he's trying to appear cooperative while actually being defensive. This is classic political damage control from somebody who knows the investigation will reveal systematic failures. The multiple federal agencies involved, Treasury, Transportation, Justice Department, and others, shows this isn't a coordinated political tack. These are separate investigations by different departments departments that all have uncovered evidence of systematic problems under Timmy Tampon Walz's leadership. Timmy Tampon Walz can dip and dodge all he wants, but the evidence of systematic failure under his administration keeps mounting. Federal investigators don't care about his political spin or his attempts to blame others. They care about following the money and holding people accountable for enabling organized crime. The commercial driver's license scandal shows how Walz's policies created systematic vulnerabilities that criminals exploited. The nutrition program fraud shows his administration failed to implement basic oversight of federal programs. The autism scam shows his agencies allowed fraudulent claims to explode without proper verification. When you combine all these failures with the evidence of stolen money was flowing to terrorist organizations overseas, you have a pattern of systematic negligence that goes far beyond normal government incompetence. This is what happens when ideology becomes more important than accountability. America, Tim Walz's transformation from a guy who claimed to be friends with school shooters
I've become friends with school shooters.
to a governor desperately dodging federal investigations shows the complete collapse of accountability and democratic leadership. When Transportation Secretary Duffy revealed that 33% of Minnesota's commercial driver's license were issued unlawfully, when Treasury Secretary Bassett investigates terrorism funding connections, when multiple federal agencies threaten to cut funding, that is not political prosecution. That is the consequences of systematic government failure. Walz's pathetic attempt to claim he welcomes the investigation while questioning the motives and timing shows he knows these investigations will expose systematic fraud that occurred under your Tampon Tim's watch. You can't simultaneously welcome accountability and suggest it's politically motivated. That is the kind of double talk that got Minnesota into this mess in the first place. The scope of the fraud under the Tampon administration, from nutrition programs to autism services to commercial driver's license, shows the pattern of systematic negligence that enabled organized crimes to flourish. When criminals can steal billions in tax money and funnel it into terrorist organizations while getting fraudulent licenses to operate commercial vehicles, you've completely failed as a leader. Walz's dipping and dodging strategy might work with the friendly media, but it won't work with federal investigators who are following the money and documenting the systematic failures that occurred. The heat lamp is only going to get hotter as more evidence emerges. Remember to check out our complete Minnesota fraud playlist to see how we actually got to this point. The link will be somewhere on the screen or in the description down below. This story is far from over, and Walz's attempts to dodge accountability are only making the eventual reckoning even more severe. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.